Everybody, it's time for Driftwood Tavern presents. I'll have a good intro for this at some point. But please join me in welcoming Neverwinter's executive producer and my boss on two different games, Mr. Brett Norton. Say
Hi,
hello,
everybody.
Brett.
It's me again.
He sounds so excited. So before we get started, we're going to dive right into questions here. We've got some from some content creators that were sent to us, and then we're going to take some from your chat. But we want to lay out a few ground rules. Some of these you may already know if you've watched any of my streams before, but we're going to go into it. Number one, we don't talk about upcoming content unless it's already announced. If you're asking when is this going to happen or when is that going to happen, especially when it comes to things like mounts or story or things like that, we can't talk about it because game development is a constant shifting surface, and we never want to sound like we've promised you guys something and then have it change on us suddenly. Rule number two, don't be a jerk. Remember the people that you are looking at on the screen right now and that you are talking with in chat are human beings and with human lives, and we love you all, but please don't make us cry. If you ask a question that is phrased blank when, I will actively make fun of you, but I will not get the question answered. Before the questions pile in, we have no new plans on Neverwinter for new races or classes at this time. So that might change in the future, but right now it's not something we're focusing on because of the amount of development time that goes into that and the resources we currently have in the team. And we won't have a roadmap today, but when Module 27 is in the clear, we're going to look at releasing something a little more like that. Let's see. We're not going to be really answering specific bug and class update questions here on the stream, especially bug reports. If you report a bug in the chat, there's a chance I'll see it and write it down, but it's so much better for you to report it on the forums or on the
Or Discord.
Our Discord. It's just what I was about to say, where our devs go daily, including me, to read that stuff. There are no plans for any changes to PvP right now, just in case that question comes up. And someone just asked in chat already, there are no giveaways today because giveaways take a bunch of time, and it means that we answer less of your questions. So we want to answer all of your questions. There we go. All right. So with that said, hold on to your questions in chat for right now, but send them our way and repeat them if we don't see them. And we are going to head into some questions that we got from Aragon's community. There's a bunch of these, so we're going to go through them fast so we make sure we have time in the hour to answer you guys' questions in chat. So, first off, has there been any thought given to restoring old content? First off, how are you today, Brett?
Mostly doing fine. I
I
have
got
a
into
couple of
business
young
mode
kids.
there, and then I was like, wait,
Yeah,
human
yeah,
being,
yeah.
not answer factory.
If you see the image, I have a young daughter, and I recently had a young son a while back. And between the two of them, sometimes they don't let me get as much sleep as I'd like. And last night they didn't let me get a lot of sleep. So I apologize if I seem a little tired today, but I am here and trying to answer questions as best possible.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So, and by the way, same. My daughter has been refusing to go to sleep, and I am also very tired. So, we'll see what happens today with both of us in our moods. So, question number one: has there been any thought given to restoring old content like Old Sharandar, Black Lake, Tower District, and Pirate Skyhold, potentially bringing them back as adventures like what was done with Rothy Valley?
Yes, specifically, yes. Old Sharndar, probably not, but the other ones, absolutely. Next question.
All right. That was so quick. Oh man, we might
No,
actually do this.
I know. Yes, there'll be some more of that. I can't spoil anything right now, but yeah.
Okay. Have we ever thought about adding gameplay functionality to vanity pets?
Yes, we have specifically discussed having them potentially be a form of loot or a coin vacuum, so they can pick up some of the stuff for you. But it takes a bit more work, and it's not super high on our to-do list right now. But it is something that we all were like, oh, we really want this.
Cool. Has there been any thought to add a third Paragon to some classes, like a DPS path for Paladin, potentially bringing back vaulted powers from
No.
the Mod 16? Okay, cool.
I'm gonna kill that one. The reality is no. Do not expect new paragons. Do not expect third paragons. If we did, it would be a fairly massive feature. It's something that we would likely need to roll out game wide, and it would take quite a long time to put in. But if you're holding out hope that a third paragon will show up with the next module or even the module after that, please don't.
Cool. Quickly going to answer a question myself from chat. It's Crusader99 wants to know if we've ever thought about crossplay. We think about it all the time. The unfortunate truth is, when our games were designed, PlayStation and Xbox and PC weren't playing nice with each other the way they are now, and it would be a rather large technical hurdle.
Yeah.
So we've thought about it.
We know we would like crossplay too. Everyone internally on Neverwinter wants crossplay, but it requires it's much easier to structure a game from the ground up for crossplay than it is to reverse engineer a game that did not start with crossplay to have it.
Cool. All right. Will we be getting a module release based on the new Planescape D&D 5e adventures that are releasing this year?
Yeah, we are looking at that. I will not make any promises, but we are aware that there's some upcoming Planescape slash Sigil related D&D module stuff. No promises, but it is something we always try to consider leveraging the settings that are coming up in the D&D tabletop and pen and paper experience when we are thinking of modules. But we generally also lag behind them by a little bit, so anything that we would be considering would be likely next year. So something in 2024.
So you heard it here. We're remaking Planescape Torment inside the Neverwinter. No, I'm just
Absolutely not remaking Planescape Torment, as cool as that would be.
Thank you for Bo Willock who complimented my nails. I paid a lot of money for these. Will we be getting the Paladin class updates with Module 27?
Oh, quick note. We're trying to do some collab stuff with various other D&D studios. I'm not going to comment on anything that might be in progress, but it's something we've considered.
Oh, I see the question you're responding to.
To note, if you haven't noticed, we actually do collaborations with Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms. Sergeant Nox is available in Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms.
In fact, mythical Sergeant Nox with his super cool purple
Mm-hmm.
armor. Believe me, folks, if there was a way for us to get Karlash in this game, I already would have possessed Brett's body and made us do it. That's just what would happen. I know some of you are Asterion stands, but Karlash is Bay. Anyway, will we be getting the Paladin class updates with Module 27?
Apologies, hang on a quick second. Sigil.
Yeah?
If I'm pronouncing it on, I don't know, I've always heard it pronounced Sigil or Sigil, but if it's Sigil, it's Sigil. Okay, I'll double check that. Sorry, what was the class balance one you said?
Will we be getting the Paladin class updates with Module 27? Do you want me to just answer it?
Will we? The answer is yes. And if you want to use some of the media, maybe this might be a good time.
Oh yeah,
to load up.
I think so. Let's pull some stuff up.
All right, we do have some media for this one. Yeah, they're relatively tiny.
There you go. That's big enough. So here is Blood Fury.
No, that's Barbarian.
No, that's Barbarian. Wrong thing.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about Barbarian later.
Fine.
Here is Intimidating Presence.
Okay, hang on. I can't see the images. I gotta wait for them
to okay, it's the Intimidating Presence tooltip that you sent me.
There we go. All right. So there's some updates here. Obviously, forewarning, a lot of this Paladin work is still work in progress. The next module will not be out for some time, but we are actively working on things like feats and things for the Paladin, and a number of other changes, both to the tanking Paragon, Justicar, as well as the healer Paragon, Oathkeeper. And so this is one of the changes to Intimidating Presence. We're looking at the capstone feats here for the Justicar and trying to make them for more of an interesting choice and trying to figure out ways that we can handle some of the stuff. There's a number of changes going on to both those, and we're trying to just expand some of the options. We know that certain feats give the illusion that they're meaningful options, but we definitely have seen players settle on a lot of those. And especially for the capstone feats, which are the final feat on each of the trees, we want those to be more interesting choices and provide different utility in different situations. That doesn't mean that they're all going to be the best thing in master mode only content. Some of them are explicitly targeted around soloing or in group content or whatnot, but we try to at least make sure that they have unique places.
I put Divine Touch up as well, so if you want to just talk about all Paladins.
Oh man, you're putting the big bomb up with the Divine Touch. Yeah. So Divine Touch is a heal power with the Oathkeeper Paragon for Paladins, and it's undergoing some substantial changes. We have not been a huge fan internally of the sort of split heal mechanic that we have seen on both Divine Touch, Revitalize, as well as Bastion of Health for Clerics, and we have been toying around with some solutions, and our current systems team has been trying out what you see there with Divine Touch as a way to modify it. It also does not have a divinity cost. We're experimenting with some ways to add more variety amongst the paladin heals, such that so some of them do cost divinity and some of them might not, but they're on longer cooldowns. So there's a couple of things you're seeing there with Divine Touch is what we're testing internally. And once again, I will warn everyone who's going to go out and try to tell everyone, oh, this is absolutely what's going to ship with the next module. It may not be. This may undergo
Subject to
significant changes.
change.
We have talked about radical things such as maybe we don't do that added effect there, or maybe we half the cooldown and half the healing so that you can use it more frequently, etc. So substantial changes to all of these powers are quite likely, and any numbers that you see there are also highly subject to change. Like with intimidating presence, the magnitude may be a quarter of that if we find that to be too much. It may only be 20 magnitude by the time it finally ships. So huge swings in balance are still extremely likely to happen at this point.
Cool. Do you want me to just pull up the uh, barbarian stuff and we can talk about that real quick since
Sure,
we
go
have
ahead
that?
and bring
Yeah,
it
let's
up,
do
and
it.
we'll provide a little bit of context. So while the Paladin one is in work, we have also secretly been working on a small Barbarian update. The Barbarian update is largely targeted at the Sentinel or Tank Paragon for the Barbarian, but there are a few quality of life fixes for the Blade Master DPS Paragon as well. What you're seeing here is a change to Blood Fury, which is one of the capstone feats for the Barbarian Sentinel tank, and Primal Fury, one of their key unique encounter powers. To note, there was an issue with Primal Fury where it actually didn't. It basically broke the UI display of the Rage bar when it was used without Blood Fury. So we have incorporated some of the functionality that was previously in Blood Fury into Primal Fury. You can read the new tool or the current in progress tooltip for Primal Fury right there on the screen. And that basically means that we had to revise the Blood Fury feat to provide some additional benefits since we kind of stole some of its functionality and moved it into Primal Fury to make it a bit more of a robust choice. So by default, Primal Fury now ends unstoppable when you use it. We've also explained sort of the magnitude thresholds for it a bit more and modified those a bit. There are some other reasons that I'll talk about why the magnitude thresholds of Primal Fury have been changed as well. But you can also see that the new feat also reduces the cost of it. To note, it's not reflected in the tooltip of Primal Fury there because we didn't take it, but you can see that the new feat Blood Fury actually reduces the cost of Primal Fury as well. So this is
All right.
some of the work in progress for the Sentinel. There are a number of other changes. It's not as extensive as the Paladin changes. It's more aligned with what we did recently with the Warlock Soulweaver. So you can expect to see a reasonable change to a couple of the Sentinel's encounter powers, a couple of its at-will powers, and a couple of its feats will be revised to basically give it a couple more interesting options as well as just in general try to make it a more usable tank Paragon. We understand that players who are very good with Sentinels can still complete master content with it, but we feel that from an approachability standpoint, the Sentinel suffers in a couple of areas that makes it trickier to sort of it's tricky to learn how to play than the fighter or paladin tanks respectively. And that's not great because the barbarian is actually a very popular class. There are a lot of potential barbarian tanks that might be willing to play the barbarian tank more if there was a bit of a lower barrier to entry. And it's kind of why we also looked at the quality of life changes to the Warlock Soulweaver, because there are a lot of Warlock players. It's actually a fairly popular DPS class, and we could potentially get a lot more healers into the game if the Soulweaver was a more approachable, which is, if you've seen the Warlock Soulweaver changes that were patched in earlier this week, some of the changes to Vampiric Embrace and a couple of their other powers were just intended to make that class easier to play without hopefully raising the power ceiling on them too much. Because once again, we know that there are quite good Warlock Soulweavers that have completed Demon Web Pits on Master, etc. So, but we did want to expand it such that if you are not a Master player and not a Master Soulweaver, you could jump in and do like a dungeon queue or a random advanced dungeon queue with your Soulweaver without being an expert on it.
Cool. Keith wants to know if you can go into the Blade Master changes you talked about a minute ago.
Very small changes. Don't expect a lot for the Blade Master. It's a couple of small fixes. One of the changes, I think you have an image for hidden daggers if you want to throw that one up. I think I may have sent you that one. But for example, we're looking at a couple of the encounter powers which are lesser used, like hidden daggers, and trying to
You
make them.
don't know that you sent me hidden daggers. I will look
Maybe
again.
not. If not, then don't sweat it.
Okay.
But we're looking at some of their encounter powers like hidden daggers and trying to make that usable again. It's something that we have seen extremely low usage of. As a area of effect or multi-target encounter power, it is woefully underutilized. So we're trying to rebalance it a bit to make it something that's a bit more usable.
I
There's
was
a couple
wrong.
of
You did,
other.
and it's on screen now.
Okay. There are a couple of other powers that are related to that we are attempting to improve. So if you expand that and bring it up, all right, perfect. So you can kind of see kind of what we're messing around with hidden daggers right now. Previously, a very long time ago, for those who remember pre-mod 16, hidden daggers used to have multiple charges. We've actually brought this functionality back to hidden daggers. It has a lower cooldown per charge. Ignore the numbers like cooldown and things like that too. Those are subject to a lot of change. But basically, it retains its sort of current effect where it does projectile damage and has a much lower cooldown. But now you have multiple charges for it. You still, however, need to use an attack other than hidden daggers to proc the surprise attack effect. So the cadence we're hoping with hidden daggers that you will throw hidden daggers at things, you will hit them with something else, and then if necessary, you will throw another hidden daggers at your targets and then hit them with another power right after that. You can get a pretty reasonable amount of hopefully DPS, and again, we're going to play with the numbers to ensure that it's hopefully somewhat viable in that sense. But the gist is that we're trying to make this something as a more of a meaningful choice. It's largely just completely ignored by Blade Master Barbarians in almost all of their builds as is right now. So hopefully this will bring back some love to hidden daggers here.
Cool.
Um,
Drakary1 has a question
Oh, sorry.
about.
Last thing I want to say is that, sorry,
No, it's
you'll
okay.
notice that we changed the tooltip there. It no longer says leap backwards. It says slide backwards. We have drastically reduced the distance at which it moves backwards. The Barbarian is a melee class, and while it was an attempt to make hidden daggers an escape ability, we have sort of removed that function on because it basically was not playing out well. It was not worth losing your access to melee powers following hidden daggers. So you'll be able to throw hidden daggers and then say use relentless slash to hit and proc the surprise attack if you wanted to with relative ease now. So there's a small backwards movement, but it is not nearly to the degree of pulling you out of melee range. So the sort of hidden daggers into relentless slash combo should hopefully work.
Cool. So Drakary1 had a question about Sentinel Barbarian and the changes. They're saying that the main issue as playing a Barbarian tank, and I don't know if this is accurate, is that it doesn't have as much utility for the rest of your party the way Paladins and fighter tanks do. Have we done anything to give them the ability to help their friends?
There are two small utility changes, although one of them's pretty impactful for the Sentinel. Number one is that the Crushing Advance feat, which allows Savage Advance to reduce the outgoing damage of a target, typically used on a boss, has been changed to be a unique debuff so that it no longer conflicts it no longer has stacking problems with other powers. It only basically worries about its stacks against itself. So every Barbarian Sentinel that has Crushing Advance can use that to reduce a boss's outgoing damage. And we've also increased the value of that. It's currently at roughly about 10%, so we've doubled the outgoing damage debuff that Crushing Advance applies. And we've also made it so that it'll stack with other effects. It used to conflict with a number of other powers in the game that would override it, or they would basically compete against each other. It's no longer like that. Crushing Advance is now completely unique, and the only thing it doesn't stack with is if there are multiple Barbarian Sentinels, you can't multi-Crushing Advance something and get multiple stacks of Crushing Advance. You can only have one stack of Crushing Advance on it at a time.
Cool.
And then additionally, we've also revised it's a disarming takedown. Disarming takedown no longer is now also a unique debuff that does not conflict or compete for any other debuffs in the game. Disarming takedown increases physical damage taken of the target, so it's a way to make your party's offense a bit stronger. And that's now a unique debuff, so you can use that and stack it with things like Wicked Reminder and other things.
Cool. I'm going to jump ahead in questions because several people have asked this question in chat. So, what is the stance regarding the inherent penalties that melee characters have over ranged classes, such as damage, uptime, and survivability? Is there any perspective to give some quality of life to those melee classes so they can perform equal to ranged classes on the same level of commitment?
That's a larger thing. It is definitely in our mind. It's something that our lead systems designer Robert has talked about, and he feels that the balance is currently definitely slated more towards range classes, and that the solution is largely going to be to buff melee classes. We're probably not going to try to nerf range classes. We're just going to have to probably apply a decent amount of buffs to melee classes. And some of the changes to the Barbarian Blade Master are at the initial tip of that iceberg. We are expecting, hopefully, and I will not make any promises, to try to apply apply some QL fixes to fighters, wardens, and rogues to an extent on that. Well, rogues, generally speaking, are pretty reasonably strong though, but we are definitely seeing that fighters, barbarians, song blades, and wardens kind of suffer a bit within that one. Secondly, kind of whisper knives do too as well. They're a mix. They have some range, so they have a lot of melee stuff. But whisper knives as a whole, obviously, we know need a lot of buffs, and that's kind of our short list of future things to hit. If you're wondering like what would we do after all of these paladin changes and some of the barbarian stuff and the warlock solar things that we've talked about, it's likely going to focus on underperforming melee classes.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. I'm gonna send that question to Misa because that's all good ideas for her. Had there been any thought to introduce potions to crafting, similar to the flask of potency but with different stats?
Yes, we have talked about more crafting options. We'd love to try to create more consumable sinks for things like professions and anything else that we can. So we're trying to find some time to throw in some more craftable potions, craftable flasks, etc., to provide a wider variety of stats. We know that some of those stats are kind of getting old, and they largely mostly help DPS and a little bit on the healing path, and there's not a lot of great options for tanks.
All right. Let's see. That's a bug report. Um, I've seen a lot of people asking questions about this recently. We've introduced a lot of character-bound gear recently. What's the philosophy behind that?
It's a mix. Like we try to do some character bound rewards if we feel that we want something to be tied uh, incentivized to like for by completing campaign. Like it's a one shot reward for completing the campaign on that character sort of thing. That is intended to be a character bound reward. Account bound stuff, we try to put a reasonable amount of account bound items or just not bound items at all to provide a way to bootstrap up various characters. For example, there's a large number of very good shirts and pants that are completely unbound that you can get from Module 26 Narbandelian District. And so we try to put in and breadcrumb ways to advance your alts relatively easily to kind of keep them up with your sort of if you have like main characters, if you try to run multiple characters. But we're trying to make it such that we can't. What we don't want to do is also have no reason to play your alts where either everything can be purchased on the auction house or everything for your alts can be earned solely through a single main character. We do want to have some encouragement of unique things to progress with each of your characters, but we try to strive a balance there. And if there's components where if players are like, hey, I really don't feel that I can get any items in X slot for my alts, please bring that to our attention. It gives us an avenue to explore as we design rewards for future modules, and we try to periodically shake it up such that there are different ways of getting different rewards for different slots for your character. So like one module might focus on companion gear, one module might focus on shirts and pants, next module might have some more basic armor items, etc. But we do try to shake it up a bit so that each module has like some slightly different themes and focuses.
All right. Let's see. Okay, so a bunch of people have started asking for different classes. Remember, we said at the beginning, there's no plans at this time. Don't worry about asking that. Let's see.
Yeah.
A bunch of people have asked for ways to upgrade old gear, specifically artifacts in this question that I'm looking at. If there's a way that you could take an older artifact and upgrade it to a modern item level. Is that something we've ever considered?
We've considered there's a couple of solutions and we've been talking about like what we want to do with that. The reality is that we're likely to release some new artifacts that provide some of the benefits or similar functionality to some of the older artifacts. Retooling the older artifacts we will do if we feel that there's a direct need or if we want to you know specifically bring up like a key historically valuable piece of Neverwinter gear up in those methods. But we also do release new artifacts periodically that hopefully fill the same niche as the older artifacts. So if you're asking, it's like, hey, there was this artifact, that was good 3 years ago, and I'd like to see it new. We definitely try to provide new artifacts that fill that exact same niche. So it's not like saying we're going to go back and make, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of a really old one, Aurora's Whole Realm catalog or something along those lines, and modernize it completely. But we might release something that has similar effects to it that is viable in the current Neverwinter meta. But we're pretty picky about what we do with artifacts, and only on very rare occasions will we go back and explicitly buff a very old artifact. In a lot of cases, we will look at like, hey, what do players like about it? What's the functionality, and how can we incorporate that into some of the new rewards that we are releasing?
All right. So we got a question about strongholds. which we knew
There's
was
always a
coming.
question about
There's
Stronghold.
always a question about Stronghold. Karama Zilail wants to know when, if we're going to address Stronghold building costs. I know you said there's a couple of, when we were talking about this before the stream, there's a couple of Stronghold quality of life changes coming in a few small areas. Do you want to talk about that?
We fixed just a couple of small bugs, and we're trying to look at ways to allow players to expedite building new, basically leveling up their new guilds, etc., and advancing their strongholds more quickly. And we're also looking at ways we can facilitate that. I can't make any promises right now. We are working at a couple of small things that will allow players to advance it more quickly. We're not talking about any kind of massive redos for stronghold leveling as a whole, but we've seen some good feedback suggestions on ways to give starter or sub level 20 guilds a way to advance more quickly. And we're trying to see what we can do to do that in a simple enough way that it doesn't completely trivialize guild and stronghold progression, but at the same time does make it a bit easier for those that are sort of in the middle grounds and are having a hard time advancing.
Top Shotter Forever says they 100% can't be reading this Twitch chat, so I wanted you to know that I read your comment, Top Shotter Forever. I'm reading your Twitch chat, and I read your comment. Thank you for joining us. All right,
And
let's see what else we
I'll
got.
say, hey, I'm reading the Twitch chat a little bit too because the Druid and Monk are currently not on the roadmap. So
Yep.
sadly to say that I do not expect
Which
to see
is
those
really,
classes in the
Brett,
near future.
difficult for me because my main D&D character is always a Minotaur monk, and I'm going to need that by next week, just so you know. Okay, we've got a couple of people who have expressed dismay or disappointment on our resolution to the Demon Wings issue. Do you want to talk a little bit about what happened there and why we made the decisions we did?
Yeah, the reality is that there's no easy way to basically gloss over is that we made a fairly substantial mistake. For those of you curious as to how we could have made such a mistake, at any given time when we are working on a new module, we have a lot of various new pieces of content and features in flight all at once, and many of those are things that will not be released in that module for months. So while when we, for example, put out our big patch for module 26, we had things in that patch that would not actually be available to players for many, many, many months down the road. And in some cases, some things weren't even for that module; they were for future modules. So we have things sometimes that won't even show up for 6+ months that come out that. And the problem was is that we were working on our new Heroes Path as part of our big feature releases, and we had simultaneously, completely separately, created some new rewards that were intended to be used for new systems and things to be released later in modules. Later in modules 26, and there was unfortunately some conflation between as we were working on the Heroes Path and adding new rewards to the Heroes Path, as to which items were to be reserved for the Heroes Path and which items were to be reserved for future things in module 26 and beyond. And unfortunately, as a result of that, the demon wings showed up as a part of the Heroes Path rewards when they were not intended to be. They were expected to be reserved for things future. We have a number of other wings we had actually slated for some specific items at the time. We thought we had reserved them for the Heroes Path. It turns out we didn't. So instead, we wound up with a situation where the items we thought we'd reserved for the Heroes Path did not get reserved, and instead items that were not ever supposed to appear in the Heroes Path got pulled into the Heroes Path. And we wanted to reconcile that because then we got the situation where the lockbox of Shadowy Flight came out, and now the item that was supposed to be exclusive to that had been used elsewhere in the game. It's not a situation that we're happy with, and we sent out a big apology, make good, for those people that had selected the Demon Wings as their reward for completing the Hero's Path. We gave them basically another reward to choose from, so they basically got a free Demon Wings out of it. And players who advance down the Hero's Path will still have the current choice pack, which has like the golden companions and a lot of other very high value items within it as well too. So for the players that do complete the hero's path going forward, there's a really great reward pack at the end of that one. But we felt the need to correct our mistake, and the cost of us was basically giving out, and it wasn't, not a ton of players had managed to complete the hero's path yet since it's a very long tail, but the cost of us was that we had to give out several thousand free demon wings as a result of our mistake.
Uh, Benane Flamby 333 asks, "What about boons? They gonna change soon?"
If
You want me
only
to
we
press the
had
button?
some media talking about boon changes. If only there
Maybe.
was
If only
something
there was a
there.
picture right here. I'm gonna cover our faces so the subtitles are readable.
That's fine. Okay. You can put that one
Tell
in.
us about this image, Brett. It's on the screen.
All right. there's a very image here. You might see some things on this screen that don't look like the current boon screen. You might see some words like varying costs and whatnot on those boons. The boon system is going to be changing a good bit here with the next module. A lot of it will still remain the same, and you'll still progress through some of the lower tiers as you might expect. But now you will have access to a larger set of master boons and whatnot as you advance, and will be able to get access to more than just a few master boons. You'll actually be able to acquire different master boons by spending additional boons, and the boon cost of buying ranks in some of those various boons will increase. So as you progress, it might take 3 or 4 boon points to acquire a new rank in a master boon rather than just one. So there's going to be an adjustment to various costs. There will be value to getting more and more boons, and the effects specifically of the master boons have been rebalanced in a number of cases to try to make them more attractive and more interesting to seek new boon points into. So, number one, you'll be able to get access to more boons, and you'll have a reason to spend all those excess boon costs. And number two, we're trying to make a lot of the boons that were sort of underwhelming or undervalued way more interesting, fun, balanced, powerful, etc., so that there are more meaningful choices in the boon tree as a whole as well.
Maverick says, "Hello, what did I miss? Everything." Uh, but we're gonna keep going. Okay, let's see. Trial by Fire follows up that with that up with saying, "Okay, so you're saying you can buy a lot of smaller boons, or a few major boons, or a mix?"
I'm not going to go into the buying system since there's still
Okay.
some balancing and changes that have to go through with that as we get close to the end of the module. I'm just trying to express the intent of what we're trying to do here with the boon system. You will be able to purchase more master boons, for example, and they will have varying costs. The more master boons that you have, the more expensive that they get. So we're creating basically a bit of a boon sink. So all those boon points you've had will have more sinks. And like I said, we were also trying to make it so that there are more useful and valuable master boons to choose from.
All right. D Holland or DS Holland, one of those, asks, any plans to add additional daily options for the Bard?
Uh, Not at this time. The reality is that we know that the Bard has fewer daily options than some of our older classes, but they also have a lot more songs and they have a lot more sort of. They're a unique class. They have fewer dailies, but they have access to songs, and songs almost function as an additional power tier that they exclusively get access to. And when we look at the whole set of like how many different power types do bards have access to, it's not less than other classes, even though it kind of feels like because their daily bar is a little bit shorter. They actually have quite a lot of unique powers that they have access to, especially when you factor in things like they can change around how some of their at-wills work. So we don't view the bards as being the bard problem as being they don't have enough options right now. We understand that it's more limited specifically with dailies, but their power set as a whole is fairly diverse. And there are things like balance with some of their classes that we talked about earlier in the stream that we're going to be looking at before we revisit like anything like adding new daily powers to the bard. That being said, we do know that song blades in particular might need a little bit of love. They fall into a lot of the same melee balance issues we've mentioned before.
Cool. Um, let's see. We've had a okay. This is a weird one to me. We've had a number of different console players come in here with what sounds like a bit of a conspiracy theory about how powers are getting nerfed because PC players can use keybinds to fire them off faster, and they can't do that on console. So console is getting punished for
I,
PC changes. What do you feel about that, Brett?
Okay, so to comment a little bit, there's a couple of things. This is a very touchy subject. Number one, we don't build our content and we don't build our challenges around assuming that players are using keybinds to do things. And if we find something that is highly exploitative with a keybind only, we are changed it. And I will be very blunt here. The changes to the clerics scattering light at willpower were done because there was extensive exploiting that had become a lot more popular, especially on PC, but even in other areas where the power was broken. It was, to be blunt, it was bugged. It was implemented in a way that was buggy. It never should have been cancelable as fast as it was. But PC exposed the upper limit. PC key binding exposed the upper limit to which it could be canceled in a way that was very destructive to game balance and made it very difficult to balance cleric dailies. And so if we run into situations where there are powers that can be heavily exploited with binds, we will hopefully change the powers, because that generally means there is a problem with the power in the first place and we need to fix the power. But we have also discussed and are discussing very much internally changing around and basically not allowing certain macro commands on PC anymore. There is a reasonable chance that in a near future module patch, certain macro keybinds will no longer be exposed to players. And those are things that, for example, allow you to start, stop certain actions in the same server frame. For the people who don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Not going to affect you at all. You don't use keybinds, you're not going to worry. For the people that are figuring out trying how to optimize 0.01 seconds off of something by canceling and starting it in the same server frame, yeah, some of those functionality might be going away. We don't want Neverwinter to have to be played with macro keybinds, and we don't want to have to worry about balancing the game around the usage of those. Because absolutely, especially for console players, we do not want the game to people to feel like they're underperforming, and we don't want balance to be skewed by people who do use those sorts of keybinds on PC.
Cool. Hollow God 7, the answer to your question is no. Just not going to read that one out loud, just going to keep on moving, but I wanted you to know the answer is no. Let's see. Okay. Uh, so Jen Gland says, can you give us any insight on the... She says unprecedented changes coming with Module 27, which to me sounds like charged language. Is somebody quoting you somewhere? Did you say something like unprecedented changes somewhere?
Maybe.
I
Um,
see.
I'll drop some fun hints here though. Module 27 is going to feature a very unique and different setting than things that we have done here in the past for Neverwinter. It's going to be fun, and we're super excited about it. And if things go according to plan, you might only have to wait maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks before we actually put Module 27 up on the PC preview shard, and then hopefully soon, shortly afterwards, on the console beta shards as well.
Dun dun dun.
So, if you're
I will
curious as to
say,
what that might all be,
I'm just gonna
you don't
speak
have much
from
longer to wait.
I'm just gonna speak from my own heart. I am so excited about this update, y'all. I cannot wait for y'all to see it and try it. Yeah, very very excited about that setting, which will only give a hint if you know the kind of D&D I like, which I don't think many of you know. So it'll be good. Um, let's see. Define fun. No, you define fun. That's for you to define. Art is subjective. Let's see. I believe this I can answer. Maverick says it's the new mod, a new dungeon or trial. It's a trial, right?
For Module 27, it is a trial.
Yeah, and it is not still in the Underdark, Foxboy 97. We can tell you that.
Yes, we
Okay.
are we are officially done with our return to the Underdark sort of block that we've done. Module 26 was the last module in that block, and we are starting a brand new block with Module 27.
All right. That's very exciting. Okay, let's see. Um, okay, Vaulting Frog, that sounds a bit more like a bug report or balance report than a question for Brett, so please put that on the forums or Discord. I just pulled an Uno reverse on the fun combat. You darn right I did. Okay, looking for more questions coming in. I am Sky Handler has posted. Normally, Brett, when I give you a question, I rephrase the question so that it's not full of the rage. But this question was so hilariously phrased that I'm going to have to give it to you verbatim.
All right, go for it.
Sky Handler wants to know: do you think about making any changes to the Arbiter cleric? He is simply trash, discarded by society, abandoned and hated by everyone. Poor Arbiter cleric. Now I'm just imagining him sitting in his corner sadly while a sad saxophone solo plays.
Yeah. To note, the Arbiter is not what I would consider in a terrible spot. We know that it is not the top tier range damage dealer. However, that being said, it still actually outperforms a number of our melee DPS paragons, and so that's the sort of issue, is that we know the Arbiter is not great, and we're going to try it if we can throw some small fixes its way too. We actually did a small update to a couple of its powers like Conflagrate and whatnot, just to clean some bugs and improve its DPS output. But we'll try to look at some small updates to the Arbiter. We know that it is one of the, I have to double check the data, so don't hold me to this. I think it is the lowest performing range damage zone class, but it is still higher than many of our worst melee DPS paragons and across a subset of content where we look at these things, just overall performance-wise, the value of its range power. So that's the problem. We know that if you're comparing yourself against certain other classes, say wizards and whatnot, you're not feeling incredibly powerful. But if you're comparing yourself against some of our weaker melee classes, the arbiters are still actually outperforming them in a number of cases. That all being said, we know that they are in need of some love too.
Tony's Coffee House. It happens a lot of times when you go away from a game for a while and you come back that all your stuff is changed and you're not doing as well as you used to. Luckily, Neverwinter has a great community with lots of guides and YouTube videos, so check those out and see if you can find a way to get your character better built. I almost said to a way to get better, and I don't want to be telling you get good, noob. Jeffrey Sastra wants to know if we've ever considered milestones for dungeons. So, like, if you complete a dungeon 100 times, you can get a choice pack of the dungeon drops or something like that.
Yeah, we've considered some rewards kind of like that. It takes a bit of effort to set that system up, and to some degree, that's kind of what we wanted to build a bit more generically with like the Reaper's Challenge. That's kind of the niche that Reaper's Challenge we wanted to fall into. There's a Reaper's Challenge store. It has a number of unique rewards in it, etc. And there's some of them take like doing it like 50 plus times to get access to some of those things. So it is we may leverage that store some more. There's a limit to the number of like unique stores and unique paths for buying things, and so we're trying to minimize but we're trying to minimize the number of new stores and such that we create systemically across the game. We do introduce a new store with each module's campaign, but adding like yet another Reaper Challenge like store or progression theme to the game is a bit tricky because we want to direct players to a couple different avenues.
Pinball Wizard wants to know if we're ever adding a Tarask.
Thought about it. The Trask itself is obviously a cool, huge thing. It would be great someday to do like a trial around the Trask. We try to make our trials and dungeons narratively themed though, and we would have to like come up with a reason like, well, maybe can we do a Trask themed modules or story around like a Trask awakening, etc. It's such a cool D&D creature, but it's not like a villain. It's like a force of nature. It's like fighting a tornado almost, or a hurricane. It's hard to have a story around a hurricane unless you're making like a disaster movie, which we've thought about doing. Making a cool thing, and then maybe we could have like mini Tarask companions or baby Tarask mounts, something along those lines. So we've thought about this, and we'd like to, but it's not currently on our short list.
Pinball Wizard is very angry at me right now because he was asking about account insignias, not Tarask, and he was talking to Nova. I just saw you said remember our conversation about the Tarask. The chat is going very fast. I can't follow every conversation you're going on. Don't yell at me.
We know people have asked for account style insignias. It's something we've considered. It's not currently on our short list, but it's something as a QOL update that we're going to try to look at. But don't expect it in Module 27.
Okay. 1010 Brick wants to know, is God Ore and Goristo Hide staying the same drop rate for the foreseeable future?
I'm assuming that those are the Underdark masterwork ingredients. We'll take a look at those. We know that there's that we always get a chance to try to look at how the economy plays out for masterwork when it comes on out. Those are very expensive, like chase items and things. And we'll try to take a look and see, because we know there's always some pain points. There were certainly some with Sharndar masterwork when it came out, and I think that the larger point is that it feels like there are certain items that are harder for certain classes to craft via the new masterworks than others, and there's likely needs to be a bit of an adjustment there to even out the costs for certain class-based masterwork crafting.
Sorry, I'm answering a question in chat myself. It's the first time you've... Okay, so a bunch of people are asking for a trade bar store update. What I'm gathering from I asked them for more information, and what I'm gathering is that they're asking just for more on different items to be put in the trade store. Is that something we've considered?
We've talked about some stuff and moving some things around. I don't have a short list of what those discussions have gone, but we have talked about putting a few things, like, for example, putting a slightly faster, easier, direct insignia powder conversion into the trade bar store is something that's come up a lot. We do have companion tokens, and we have mount tokens, and we've been like, I feel like we just need to put insignia powder. You can't buy epic insignias and convert them in bulk. We've also just considered being like, okay, let's just put a direct conversion into a pretty solid conversion into insignia powder, similar to what we do with companion upgrade tokens into the trade bar store. And we've talked about like adding and swapping out, for example, some of the mounts, some of the companions, some of the artifacts as well, to give a broader set of access to those too. So there's a couple of changeovers we talked about. I don't have that time frame information available, so I don't want to speak for the team that works on our sort of stores and the contents of those, but I can at least relate the discussions that we've had around that. We do know that the trade bar store does need some updates though, and needs additional syncs for those trade bars.
Advice coming in from chat that you could take or leave is to also add artifacts and shards and transmutes. Those are
Yeah.
things that people really want in the trade bar store.
Yeah,
And I will
and we know
pass
there's a
that
number
info on
of
to Miso as well.
desirable old transmutes that players have asked about restoring and bringing back that are uh, no longer available that we could put in the trade bar store too.
Cool.
But
Uh,
to note, I make the suggestions like, hey, look, we have these old transmutes, we need to get them. And then the people who deal with like rewards and monetization are often like, aha, we should sell that, or aha, no, we should put that over here. Oh, no, I want that in for a new modules like reward for the campaign or something. So there's always a fight over it
yeah.
whenever we find stuff like that. I myself try to avoid mandating where those need to go, but I do let the team knows like, hey, there's a lot of interest in this. We really need to get these back in the game.
Okay, two things. First, Paintball Wizard says, just to be fully honest, those who know me remember I was criticizing changes all the time since Zariel release. The changes that are being made since Underdark started are more and more better and better. Keep doing the good job. Unironically, well done. Thank you, Pinball Wizard. Uh,
That's great.
Huston1 says, a lot of companions only come from Call to Arms events, which we don't see anymore. Any plans to revive those? And I'll add, or move those companions to a different place so people could access them.
Uh, yeah, we have a lot of the companions that were exclusively or were only old cards have been moved to other reward tables. If there's a specific set of companions that are unavailable, actually, please let us know. Just say, hey, look, I would like to get X
Yeah.
companion. There doesn't appear to be a way to get it because even though the collections tooltip might say like, hey, it came from this old Call to Arms, a lot of times those are actually available either via dungeon drops or via opening via lock boxes because there's a random companion component of that. So we've inserted some of those ones back into other avenues, both free and paid to get access to them. So check around, make sure that those that you're not just reading the collections page and making sure that I assume that the only place to get them is from Call to Arms. We've expanded a number of the old CTA rewards into being obtainable in other places.
Um, you mentioned that, and chat on both chats blew up with the words feral raptor. You want to comment at
All
all on our
right, all
good
right,
friend the
all
feral
right.
raptor?
All right, yes, feral raptor. We are aware that there are raptors, and guess what? There's actually a couple of other unreleased raptors with different stats on them too that we have sitting in our back pocket that are probably not going to be released in their current form. The tame velociraptor and the raptors as a whole present um, a a style of design that we have not come to like. The reality is that they incentivize all players within a party to use a specific companion, and as a result of that, it starts to create a bit of a clicky or exclusionary atmosphere where if you do not have that companion yet, it creates a bit of toxicity in our social groups, and we don't like that. We like the fact that when players can use things that benefit other players, like auras and such are great. Like, hey, I get to use this aura and it makes people stronger, blah blah blah. But when you explicitly have a companion that starts having strong, I wouldn't say multiplicative, but strong stat benefits, the more people that are using it within a party, it starts to create a bit of a toxic exclusionary behavior. The tame velociraptor is strong, it's heavily used, and we're very wary of putting something like the feral velociraptor in, which for those of you who don't know where has a very similar stacking awareness bonus in the game, and just expanding that to, oh, here's another must-have companion that everyone has to have for all master content in the game. And if you don't have it, then you're going to be excluded from the party because no one wants to lose out on a bunch of extra stats that are highly valuable. So that is the problem with Raptors as we look at it. And that is why we have not explicitly released the old Raptors or even released some of the unreleased ones that also affect things like combat advantage in the exact same way. But we are trying to find a way, if at all possible, to update that design to make it feel cool. Like I said, we like beneficial ones. Like maybe if one person has the Raptor, it gives everybody a small bonus, as opposed to everyone has to have the Raptor, and if you don't, we don't want you in our group kind of mentality, which is the toxicity we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Plus, let's be real, raptors have feathers. These are scientifically inaccurate raptors, and further proof that Stowe's dinosaurs are better. Anyway, Shepherd Command 7 wants to know. So he's says, I'm phrasing a little bit, but he basically says thank you for the recent MDWP tank gear, the provoker chest specifically, that gives some bonuses when you're at full stamina. Whereas older gear had a lot of proc conditions that tanks struggle with. He describes it as I just think this is hilarious. Procking when you are hit for 20% of your max HP while owning a small business in an underdeveloped neighborhood. Um, um, do we? Is that a philosophy that we're moving towards more, having tank gear be procking less on things like damage and more on things player controls?
It's a very specific balance question. I'm not going to speak for the team that does rewards, but the items do go through our internal reward council. We have a couple of people who have done tanking, and we try to encourage a variety of gear and item powers within each of our roles: DPS, healer, and tanks. And we have tried to encourage them to expand out how tanking gear is approached. Tanks are one of the smaller portions of Neverwinter's audience, but they're extremely important, obviously, and trying to find ways to come up with different item powers for different slots that are interesting to them has been something we have explicitly been trying to do. So hopefully, if you like it, that means we have found success, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that. But it's tough because we want to give the internal team a chance to try things new, but we do have, like I said, this reward cancel that's pretty brutal. Where if they suggest an item power and we say that's hot garbage, no one's ever going to use that. We try to phrase that in a much nicer way. That we try to say, look, the reality is that here's two other items for that exact same slot that are just more easily used and consistently used. So we want to try to encourage them to think of ways to diversify the item meta, if you will, while still giving them some leeway to feel creative and try to come up with new items and such.
Cool. Um, Armagus07 wants to know if we ever were planning on having an item level cap, or are we just going to let it climb forever?
We haven't talked about an item level cap. We know that scaling wise and such, there may become a point where the math numbers get too large and start causing issues. But we're going to do what we can to contain that. But we'll look at there is a point though. If item levels get to like 300,000, what would happen? Would we see crazy problems? And there's a distinct possibility that that could eventually happen. But realistically, we're trying to avoid stepping into like any kind of massive stat reworks or anything like that. Neverwinter's had more than a few of those in its past history, and until such a thing becomes a strong requirement for the game, we would like to avoid having to do anything like changing stat scales or yeah, in any way, shape, or form like that. And I know, since I saw this one come up a lot of times, we know the Black Death Scorpion is popular. We'll look at ways, but we're not going to guarantee that we're going to make the Black Death Scorpion like an account-wide companion unlock for the time being. Yes, he's really cool. Yes, I have one, and yes, I use him a lot. But we may look at like other companions that fill similar niches. So understand that we, apart from just changing out an old companion or making an old companion more available, we also have ways of making new companions that provide those sorts of benefits.
All right. We are about 5 minutes from the end of this lovely stream. Thank you, Brett, so much for answering all these questions so succinctly and deeply. But we do have time for one more question. So somebody give me a good one. Stuff that's like really specific number dive and stuff like that is not a great one. Give me a good question. Da, da.
I'll answer the quick one. This is a fun one. It doesn't have to be the last one. To note, Paladin shields, we're in general shields as a whole, because it's not exclusive to Paladins. Warlocks have shields as well. We have looked at mechanics, for example, that would prevent shields from applying over a weak shield from overriding a stronger shield. But there is an explicit weakness to that right now. Is that means that if a strong shield has 1 second left on its duration and you try to apply a weak shield to replace it, it won't. And so you will get a strong shield for 1 more second instead of a brand new weaker shield that would have lasted for 20 seconds. And that is the reason why we have not made that change. We have been testing it, and if you see some of our companions actually are using that because they're a bit more automatic and it's less of a problem with them. The shields are smaller, but it's something we've talked about internally. It's something that we may wind up doing here, but we want to ensure that that sort of usability loss of not being able to easily refresh the duration is worth the sacrifice, since you will lose that if we make it such that weak shields cannot overrun strong shields. We're not going to try to come up with some kind of complicated form that says, well, if the power's only got 3 seconds left. No. It's gonna make it even less usable. So that is the only reason why we have not explicitly already made that change, is because there is a trade-off there that players may not see.
All right. I had a question that I think is a good one. Sort of is smashed together from a bunch of other different questions. From your perspective on game design philosophy, is it better to buff or nerf?
It's always better to buff when you can. That is a very loaded question.
I know, and that's why I'm asking it to let it away to allow you to give your philosophy.
Yes. It's always better. What you have to understand is sort of like as you play your game and work on a game, you have to understand sort of where the current sort of median level is. You look at sort of like, hey, this is the median level. This is where it's at. This is where we want it to be. Do those two align? And are there any huge outliers? When there are outliers well below the median, You want to buff them. And buffing things below your target medium is great, and everyone kind of likes that. But periodically, you realize that the median is very high because there are a couple of outliers way above everything else, and they are pulling the median up sort of unfairly. And and then in those cases, sometimes you have to bring those things down. And we've hit that a few times. We've hit that some things like the Band of Air ring was a very large statistical outlier that was bringing the median up and making it very hard to create new ring rewards. So we had to do some adjustments there. And only in those very, very significant cases do we want to try to like basically nerf things if we have to. We look for major statistical outliers or things that are monopolizing a space that prevent us from making new and interesting options in that space. It's like, cool, we want to add a new companion that does X, and everyone's like, well, companion Y already does that 3 times better. It's like, wait, what, 3 times better? That's kind of limiting in the types of rewards we can create. And we've had to do that with some commands. You've seen, when we did our companion rework, we did have to bring down the power of ye old paranoid delusion because, to be blunt, the paranoid delusion was built at a different time when balance was less known, and at the same time, changes to the stat scaling system and how we handle companions caused the damage on only a couple of classes, Paranoid's Delusion, to be quite crazy. And we looked at that, it's like there's no way to buff every companion in the game to the highest possible power of the most strongest Paranoid Delusion. We have to bring those specific classes, Paranoid Delusions, way down. And we still left a couple of them being pretty powerful, but a couple of them got significant changes because we could not have the bar for companion damage to be as high as some classes paranoid delusions.
All right. Well, folks, thank you all so much for joining us. A lot of folks are still posting feedback and questions in chat. Remember, the forums and Discord are a great place for that because not only do I check it and QA checks it, far as I can tell, Brett spends 90% of his day on the Discord. So
That's absolutely not the case. I
I
do not
know, I
spend
know, I
90%
know,
of the day.
I know, I
I
know.
do
I'm
spend
kidding.
portions of some days each week.
I'm
We
kidding.
are working there. And if you mind, I'll do quick 2 rifle
Yeah,
questions
go ahead.
since it came up. Like, yes, we know fighter AOE needs some love. We're seeing if we can do some quick changes to that. But more change to that will be part of the melee update that we talked about. Secondly, and this came up as well, we know that there has been a lot of uncertainty around Embracer, that they've expressed a number of problems sort of at a corporate business level. None of those have had any significant impact on Cryptic or Neverwinter recently. Generally speaking, Cryptic is doing well because we have a number of live games that we continue to operate, and so we haven't been as affected by some of the things that you've seen hitting Embracer or its children corporations or companies and developers in that sense. So I don't have any news on that one, but the reality is that Neverwinter has not seen any substantial impact from any of the things occurring at the Embracer corporate level right now.
Yep, we're still doing good. We will obviously you'll know if that changes. All right, I'm gonna find us somebody to raid. Um, well, I had a great conversation with this guy the other day, so let's send him some love. Okay. So, folks, again, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you have a really great weekend. If you don't follow along with the raid to go watch Dead Manna's content, also the voice actors from Baldur's Gate 3 are streaming a Dungeons and Dragons game right now, and that sounds really fun. And I really want to appreciate, I want to thank you again, Brett, for being so open and willing to communicate with the community. I know everybody really appreciates it. So, thank you for coming on and doing things like this.
It's a pleasure. I'm glad to be here. I'm hopefully I got to as many of the questions that the community wanted to hear. And I remind you, expect some wonderful M27 news here in the next couple of weeks as we
Very
move towards
soon.
getting those up on our preview and beta servers.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, we can't wait for you to see the light, and we will talk to you soon. Bye bye. Bye bye, everyone. Bye
See ya.
bye. Bye bye.